The first rule of Halloween in Blackwood was simple. Be home before the streetlights flicker on. It wasn't a curfew imposed by parents, but a warning whispered by the town itself, passed down through generations like a family heirloom of fear. The second rule was never, under any circumstances, answer the door after the final flicker. My brother Liam and I had heard the stories our whole lives. Tales of the Glutton, a creature that wore the skin of the last child caught outside and went door to door, not for candy, but for souls. We'd always laughed it off, another silly small-town legend designed to scare kids. That was before last year, before we broke the rules. I'm Maya, and I was 14. Liam was 12, all gap-toothed grin and boundless energy, fueled by the prospect of a king-sized candy haul. Our town, nestled in a valley that seemed to swallow the daylight whole, celebrated Halloween with a desperate kind of cheer. Porches were decorated with grinning jack-o'-lanterns, but their candlelight did little to push back the oppressive darkness that gathered between the old leaning houses. The air was always crisp, smelling of wood smoke, decayed leaves, and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. We have to be quick, I told Liam, adjusting the witch's hat on my head. Our costumes were homemade, his a cardboard robot, mine a witch with a cloak our mom had stitched. Mom said to be back by 7. The lights are just old Maya, Liam scoffed, rattling his plastic pumpkin bucket. It's just a story to make sure the little kids go home. More candy for us. I wanted to believe him. But as we moved from house to house, receiving generous handfuls of candy from smiling, nervous adults, I felt it. A creeping dread that had nothing to do with the chill. The adults' smiles were too tight, their eyes darting towards the windows as the sky deepened from orange to a bruised purple. Doors were closed a little too quickly after we said, "Trick or treat." By 6:45, my bucket was half full, but my nerves were frayed. The streets were emptying, the laughter of other children fading as they were ushered inside. The streetlights, old iron posts with frosted glass globes, began to hum. "Liam, we have to go. Now." "Just one more house," he pleaded, pointing to a house at the very end of the street. It was the old Victorian on the hill, the one everyone called the Widow's Walk. It was never decorated, and its windows were dark. No one ever went there on Halloween. "Look, there's a light on." I squinted. A single flickering candle flame appeared in the downstairs window. It was an invitation, a trap. "No, absolutely not. We're going home." "But Maya..." The first streetlight flickered, not the gentle warm-up of a modern bulb, but a violent, sputtering flash that stabbed the twilight. My heart seized. Another light flickered down the street, then another, a wave of failing illumination rushing towards us. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Liam's arm. We ran. Our costume props clattered behind us, abandoned. The candy in our buckets spilled onto the pavement, a trail of sweets we didn't dare stop to retrieve. The world seemed to slow down. The last of the daylight was gone, swallowed by the hungry dark. Behind us, I heard the final, definitive click hum as every streetlight in Blackwood flared to full, sickly yellow life. We were still 3 houses from our own. The rule was broken. We slammed into our front door, fumbling with the knob. It was locked. We pounded on the wood, screaming for our parents. Through the stained glass window, I saw my mom's terrified face. She was shaking her head, her mouth forming the words, "I can't. I'm sorry." Her eyes were wide with a primal fear I'd never seen before. The rules were absolute. Opening the door after the lights was like bleeding in shark-infested water. Tears of panic streamed down my face. "The back door," I hissed at Liam. We scrambled around the side of the sound of a single set of footsteps on the pavement behind us. Slow, deliberate, squeak, crunch, squeak, crunch. It was the sound of cheap plastic shoes, the kind you get with a costume, dragging slightly with each step. We froze, huddled together on the bottom step. I dared to look back. A figure stood at the edge of our yard, silhouetted by the distant streetlight. It was a child, dressed in a pirate costume. I couldn't see its face, but I could see the empty candy bucket swinging from its hand. "Liam," I whispered, my voice trembling. The figure took a step forward, into the dim light from our kitchen window. It was Tommy Evans. He was in my grade. But it wasn't him. Not really. His skin was a pale, waxy gray. His eyes were solid, glossy black orbs that reflected no light. His mouth was fixed in a rictus grin, too wide for his face, filled with tiny, needle-like teeth. He smelled like spoiled milk and damp earth. Trick. The thing that was not Tommy rasped, its voice a dry rustle of leaves. Or treat. It wasn't asking. It was stating its purpose. It took another step towards us, its body moving with a stiff, unnatural jerk. A survival instinct I didn't know I possessed kicked in. I shoved Liam towards the back door. "Go! Now!" He stumbled up the steps and yanked the door open. I was right behind him. We fell into the warm, bright safety of the kitchen, scrambling to slam and lock the door. My parents were there, their faces pale with relief and horror. We all crowded around the window, peering through the blinds. The thing wearing Tommy Evans was gone. We thought we were safe. We had made it inside. We had escaped. We were wrong. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. A single chilling chime that echoed through the silent house. We all froze. My dad crept to the front door and looked through the peephole. His body went rigid. It's a little girl," he whispered, his voice cracking. "She's dressed as a ballerina. She's crying." My mom grabbed his arm. "Don't. You know the rule." "But she's just a child, Sarah. She's scared." The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Then came a soft, pathetic knocking. Tap, tap, tap. "Please," a tiny, tearful voice called from the other side. "I'm lost. I'm so scared. Let me in." It sounded so real, so helpless. My dad's hand hovered over the deadbolt. The human part of him, the father part, was screaming to help a lost child. "Look at her shadow," I said, my own voice a terrified whisper. We all looked down at the floor. Through the narrow gap under the door, the porch light cast the silhouette of the little ballerina's feet. But the shadow was wrong. It was too tall, and from its head sprouted a mess of twisted, antler-like shadows. My dad snatched his hand back from the lock as if it were red hot. The knocking stopped. The crying stopped. For a long moment, there was only the sound of our frantic breathing. Then, a new sound. A low, wet chuckle that didn't belong to a child. It was a deep, gurgling sound that promised unimaginable horrors. "Okay," the voice from outside said, now stripped of all pretense, becoming a hollow, ancient whisper that scratched at the door. "Trick it is." The scraping was the worst sound I have ever heard. It wasn't metal on wood. It was something organic and hard. A claw, a talon, perhaps a tooth, dragging slowly, deliberately, down the length of the front door. Each rasping pull felt like it was stripping away a layer of our safety, our sanity. We huddled in the dark kitchen, the only light coming from the digital clock on the stove, which glowed 7:18 p.m. It had only been 18 minutes since the streetlights came on. It felt like a lifetime. My dad had his shotgun,
but his hands were shaking so badly the barrel rattled against the kitchen table. "It can't get in," he whispered, more to himself than to us. The stories say it can't enter a home unless it's invited." The scraping stopped.
Liam let out a choked sob. The jiggling stopped. Then, a tiny, high-pitched voice, a perfect imitation of a child's, whispered through the keyhole. "I'm in." My dad didn't hesitate. He fired. The blast was deafening in the small kitchen. The shotgun shell tore a fist-sized hole through the basement door, splintering the wood. The smell of cordite filled the air. Silence. Had he gotten it? Had we won? A slow, dripping sound began from the other side of the door. Drip. 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 Then a low, gurgling laugh that was definitely not human. "Missed," the voice whispered. Something began to ooze through the bullet hole. It was black and thick, like crude oil, and it moved with a sentient purpose. It slithered down the door and began to pool on the kitchen floor, the puddle shimmering in the dim light. As we watched, horrified, the puddle began to rise, forming itself into a small, humanoid shape. It was the size of a child, a featureless silhouette of pure, dripping darkness, with only 2 points of malevolent red light where its eyes should be. The glutton had found a way in. It took a shambling step towards us, its form flickering and unstable. It raised a dripping arm, pointing a shadowy finger first at Liam, then at me. "Mine," it hissed, its voice the sound of mud bubbling up from a swamp. My dad fired again, but the shot passed right through the creature, blasting a hole in the kitchen cabinet behind it. The thing didn't even flinch. It just kept advancing, its red eyes locked on us. "Run!" my mom screamed. "To the attic!" We scrambled out of the kitchen and up the main staircase, our feet slipping on the polished wood. I risked a glance back and saw the shadow creature flowing up the stairs after us, its form pouring over the steps like a wave of ink. We burst into the attic, a cramped, dusty space filled with old Christmas decorations and forgotten furniture. My dad slammed the door shut and braced it with a heavy trunk. "We're trapped," Liam cried. "No," my mom said, her voice surprisingly steady. She was looking at an old, leather-bound book on a shelf. It was our family genealogy, filled with births, deaths, and the town's hidden history. "The stories say it can wear a skin, but it can't hold a form for long. It needs a new one every Halloween. It's strongest outside, weakest when confined." As if on cue, the thing on the other side of the door began to change. The soft, padding footsteps became heavy, dragging thuds. The childlike whisper deepened into a guttural roar. It was shedding the disguise, revealing the true horror beneath. The attic door began to splinter under a series of powerful, brutal blows. "It's breaking through!" my dad yelled. I looked around, desperate for anything we could use. My eyes fell on an old metal-framed mirror leaning against a wall. An idea, crazy and desperate, formed in my mind. "The stories," I shouted over the noise. "It never looks in mirrors. It can't see its own true form." As the door exploded inward, showering us with splinters, I grabbed the heavy mirror and heaved it upright, facing the doorway. The glutton stood there. It was no longer a shadowy child. It was a towering, emaciated horror, its skin stretched taut over a twisted skeleton. Its limbs were too long, its fingers ending in hooked claws. Its face was a nightmarish blank canvas, save for a massive gaping maw that split its head in half, lined with row upon row of rotating needle-like teeth. It was the void given shape, a hunger made flesh. It took a step into the attic, its red eyes fixed on us, and then it saw its reflection in the mirror. The creature froze. A sound came from it that I will hear until the day I die. a high-pitched shrieking wail of pure, unadulterated rage and self-loathing. It was the sound of a god seeing its own monstrousness for the first time. It clawed at its own featureless face, recoiling from its image. The form began to destabilize. The edges blurred and